My name is Michael Bodnyk, and I'm the Minister of Music here at St. Armand's Key Lutheran Church in Sarasota, Florida. I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of a brand new online series that we're experimenting with called Joyful Noise. The goal of this series is to take a look at how our readings from Sunday mornings have influenced composers musically through the centuries. I'd like to take a look at pieces that you normally wouldn't hear in the context of the worship service. And so we'll look at anything from orchestral works to large-scale choral works. For this first episode, I'd like to look at the reading prescribed for the fourth Sunday after Pentecost. We hear the very moving story of Abraham and Isaac from the book of Genesis. I'd like to read you the story just to reacquaint you with it. Genesis chapter 22. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father, "Father," and he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." For this first episode, I'd like to look at a piece by the great English composer Benjamin Britten called Abraham and Isaac. Benjamin Britten was one of the 20th century's greatest composers. Born in 1913, he grew up in a location right on the North Sea, which would actually inspire a great deal of his work. He enjoyed early musical success with his simple symphony, And a Boy Was Born, but it was actually his opera in 1945, Peter Grimes, that launched his reputation. It has been said that this particular opera raised the English opera to heights that had not been seen since Henry Purcell 250 years earlier. Britten was also a gifted pianist and conductor. He's one of my most favorite composers. He composed music for so many genres: opera, orchestra, sacred and choral music, chamber music, incidental music for film, radio, and television, and even one full-length ballet. But art song was always important to him. He penned 15 song cycles and over 60 folk song arrangements. Trained as a classical singer myself, these folk song arrangements were some of the first music that I studied. He was also very interested in the music education of children. He wrote 3 operas specifically for children, and he also wrote one of my most favorite pieces, one that I've used in over a decade of teaching in secondary schools, The Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, where he introduced young people to all the various orchestral sections using a theme by the English composer Henry Purcell. Among his works, Britten wrote a series of 5 canticles based on short stories from the Bible. They were written during the period between 1947 and 1974. The second canticle, which we'll discuss today, Abraham and Isaac, was written in 1952 and given its first performance on January 21st of that same year. It was first performed by Kathleen Ferrier and Peter Pears and accompanied by the composer Benjamin Britten. Ferrier and Pears had been on the musical scene for some time and knew each other and sang together. Peter Pears was Britten's personal and professional partner for nearly 40 years. The piece is scored for contralto, who will sing the part of the boy, Isaac, and tenor, singing the part of the father, Abraham. Graham Elliott notes that the mood and sentiments in this work are close to Britten's known sympathies for the innocent victims of violence, linking this with other works in his output such as the opera Billy Budd, The Turn of the Screw, and the monumental War Requiem. Scoring this piece for 2 voices instead of just one alone allows the singers to embody the characters. It gives this work a very operatic quality. But Britten also manages to create an implied, unsung third presence, the voice of God, by having the 2 voices sing together in a very plain song, chant-like style. As we begin the piece, you hear the 2 voices sing like this. The voice of God is further articulated in this opening section by a series of arpeggios that is specifically missing the 5th of the chord. The piece begins in E flat major, and so in the tonic chord we should hear an E flat, G, and a B flat. But we consistently miss the 5th, the B flat, in each of these arpeggiated chords. And this occurs throughout the piece. As you'll hear as the piece continues, it becomes more and more agitated as the time of the sacrifice gets closer. The piece ends in a lilting 6/8, 9/8 meter in E flat as God stays Abraham's hand. And this particular key is of significance as it has been used by many composers in times of religious feelings, partially because the key of E flat has 3 flats in the key signature symbolizing the Trinity. The final music that we hear at the very end is that fifthless arpeggio, the voice of God, that we hear at the very beginning. The parable of this canticle is that God will provide if total trust is given to him. God's mercy is total. In 2002, my mom and I were fortunate enough to attend a recital at Carnegie Hall in New York City, featuring the countertenor David Daniels, together with Anthony Dean Griffey, a wonderful tenor, and one of the most well-known contemporary collaborative pianists, Martin Katz. These gentlemen performed Benjamin Britten's Abraham and Isaac. It was one of the most memorable performances I've attended. What I remember most was that stern auditorium was entirely darkened. Hearing that opening arpeggio with the two voices chanting in darkness truly gave the feeling that a divine voice was speaking. Let's listen to a performance of this work. In this particular recording, the part of Isaac is actually sung by a boy treble. I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope you'll listen to some of Britten's other canticles, all which can be easily found by searching online. And I hope you'll join us for future episodes of A Joyful Noise. If you're in Sarasota, I encourage you to join us for worship here at St. Armand's Key Lutheran Church. And if you can't be with us in person, please join us on online. Our services are streamed on our website and also on our Facebook page. Thanks for joining us.
As thou wilt, Lord, so must it be. To thee I will be bent. Lay down my bundle, my home someday.
Already, Father, lo, it is here. But why make you such heavy cheer? Are you anything dread?
Ah, dear God, that means
Oh, if it be your will, where is the beast that we shall hear?
there our son is none of us here.
Father, I am also afraid to see you bear the drawn
My
sword.
son, peace, I pray thee, thou breakest my heart, even in three.
You, Father, lay nothing from me, but tell me what you think.
Isaac, I must thee kill.
Alas, Father, is that your will? Your only child, for to speak on this brink. If I have trespassed in any degree, with a yard you may beat me, but I'll be as hard if you will be. For I am but a child, for I am but a child.
Oh, Isaac's son,
But my mother
God hath commanded sacrifice to make This is your name. This is your name.
Is it God's will I shall be saved?
Yes, son, it is not far too late.
Father, seeing you must and needs do so, let it pass lightly and overgo. Leaning on my nearest your blessing on me spare.
Come hither, my child, thou art so sweet, thou must be bound both hands and feet. and King of bliss, thy bidding shall be done amiss. A horned meadow here I see, among the briars tied is he. To thee offered shall he be, an honor-right in this place, an honor-right in this place. Sacrifices sent me is, and all Lord through thy such obedience grant us, O Lord, to thy most holy word. That in the same